In my quest to dismantle the HOA's tyranny, I hacked their drones to follow our neighborhood queen. But can one act of rebellion truly change the fate of conformity? Before we begin today's deranged HOA story, tell me you haven't had your fill of irrational and power-grabbing HOA nonsense. Smash that like button to show you're on my side, and drop a comment if you've ever faced off against an overbearing homeowners association. Be sure to subscribe and ring the notification bell, because this saga's only getting crazier from here. As the laughter swelled around me, I felt like some sort of revolutionary rock star at a backyard concert, mosh pit style, but with gardening tools instead of guitars. Karen's attempts to reclaim the morose atmosphere were floundering like a fish out of water. Every flailing gesture she made only seemed to enrich the tapestry of this unexpected neighborhood comedy show. Someone in the crowd shouted, "Is there a sign-up sheet for this BBQ?" It was as if enthusiasm spread like wildfire, igniting the usual restraint of our suburban decorum. I couldn't help but think of the hours spent in sweat, forming debates over fence heights and mailbox colors. All of it now seemed utterly laughable as we dared to question the very fabric of HOA domination. Who knew that uniting over a potential grill-out would become a profound act of defiance? Karen's face, a kaleidoscope of emotions, could rarely go one full minute without changing from outrage to bewilderment and back again. Just imagine the horror of someone actually enjoying their community. What a deviance! All those nights she spent laboring over bylaws, only to find a motley crew of neighbors buoyed by BBQ aspirations, felt surreal. She shouted, "You're going to regret this." But honestly, if regret were a thing, I doubt anyone had ever put on record that rejoicing with your neighbors over nachos was a regrettable endeavor. It was high time we served something flavorful to contrast the bitter tastes of monotonous HOA meetings. The mob laughed as Karen gestured dramatically like she was at an overzealous audition for a Shakespearean tragedy, revealing the melodrama of her character. Out of the blue, a timid neighbor named Bill, a retiree often found tending to his roses more than engaging in communal shenanigans, bravely stepped up next to me. "You know," he said, awkwardly clearing his throat, "I've been so miserable with the rules. The day I wanted to repaint my fence to match my vibrant flower beds, well, the letter from the HOA broke my heart like you wouldn't believe." His confessions radiated through the air, and suddenly, others chimed in with their grievances like it was a therapy session. Complaints about hedge heights, driveway obstructions, and mysterious fine prints in legal jargon that left them feeling tricked like puppets on a string. I couldn't help but smile. We were all bound by the invisible threads of their collective frustrations. Who knew Karen's unwitting control over us could infiltrate our homes, turning them into mini prisons of HOA decorum? Amidst the laughter and sincerity of grievances, it struck me how sweetly absurd this revolution was becoming, the barriers of fear falling, like leaves in a crisp autumn breeze. I looked at Lila, who was beaming like a proud co-conspirator, and it hit me. Our opposition against Karen was not just for a BBQ. It was a battle cry for freedom itself, that elusive word we had whispered behind tightly shut doors during our covert neighborhood meetings. This camaraderie was the key to exposing the contradictions of Karen's rule over our fun-loving spirits. When your greatest foe turns out to merely be an overbearing character waving her arms like a cartoon villain, you begin to appreciate the poignant comedy within the tragedy. Fueled by the contagious energy of our growing rebellion, I seized the moment. "Ladies and gentlemen," I bellowed, channeling every ounce of dramatic energy I could muster. "It is now or never. Let us plan our legendary BBQ, the very first of its kind, complete with no rules at all. Burgers seared as per one's own preferences under the clouds, freedom in every bite." Cheers erupted, and with each rounding applause my heart felt lighter, buzzing with adrenaline and mischief. Even Karen tilted her head slightly at my motivational fervor, a true sign of wrestling with her outlandish attempts at reining in our spirits. I could see the blurred lines between hostility evaporating as despair met the pursuit of good food and even better company. Cooking meant taking back our kitchen conversations and sharing anecdotes, which we had neglected. "Let the BBQ become a symbol of our resistance," I declared, clasping my hands together like a general steeling for battle. "Let's recover those deep-seated, ridiculous moments we honestly never shared." Someone from the crowd shouted, "Can we incorporate a karaoke night too?" The question hung in the atmosphere like an enticing aroma, and before I knew it, a new idea seemed to grow wings. A chaotic, rules-free karaoke extravaganza. It sent wave after wave of laughter through the anxious hearts of our neighbors, and I couldn't help but let the bliss wash over me. We were allowing frustration to transform into a spectacle of community bonding, a wild rebellion against the mundane. The mere thought of becoming a melodic ensemble exercising our HOA demons felt like an audacious and liberating dream. But amidst this flutter of excitement, the lingering worries wrapped themselves around my spirit. But what if she tries to shut us down? I muttered to Lila, suddenly feeling less invincible. She caught my eye and grinned, a spark of determination igniting in her eyes. "Jackson," she chirped, nudging my arm, "if we go down in a blaze of karaoke glory and char-grilled perfection. Besides, she needs us more than we need her." What she said made sense. Why not let Karen experience a slice of our phenomenal chaos? If nothing else, it might just remind her that life can be both lighthearted and liberating, even behind the shadows of well-meaning but utterly ridiculous regulations. Whether or not Karen realized it, she had our number, and it seemed we were finally ready to play. With renewed confidence pumping through my veins, I faced the cheers that resonated from our collective rebellion. Let's do this for our neighborhood, for laughter, and a slice of liberation. After all, when life gives you security drones, you make sure they serve the primary mission of uniting us, I roared. A chorus of enthusiastic approval echoed, and I was reminded of a warm, cozy backyard bathed in sunshine, where rules could vanish, and laughter would prevail. The night was still young, and the embers of our community dreams swayed in the night wind, ready to ignite into action. What had started as a petty feud had transformed into a powerful rallying call filled with hope, mischief, and an impending BBQ that promised to unravel the chains that had bound us too long. Would we forge ahead toward our anticipated celebration of rebellion? As the echo of laughter poured into the evening air, I looked at the faces surrounding me, illuminated by the soft glow of festoon lights strung haphazardly across the backyard. Each person was a unique character in this absurd play, and I couldn't help but feel a surge of ridiculous pride. "Ladies and gentlemen," I proclaimed, waving my arms as if I were directing the very concerto of rebellion and joy. "We are not just hosting a BBQ, we are unleashing a hurricane of good spirits." My voice rose, clashing harmoniously with the excited murmurs of my neighbors who had come out of their shells like turtles drawn to sunlight. Just watching enmity dissolve under the camaraderie of grilled burgers was like watching weeds make way for vibrant flowers in our community garden. With everyone agreeing to pitch in, the backyard transformed into a delightful medley of culinary stations. I could smell Lila's caramelized onions sizzling as they danced alongside smoky burgers on the grill. The sweet aroma of barbecued chicken clashed perfectly with the saltiness of the potato chips, a sorry side dish that somehow felt rebellious in its defiance of gourmet expectations. I strolled over and patted Lila's back, taking a moment to relish the delicious chaos. "You know, if this whole graphic design thing doesn't work out, you could totally start a food truck," I joked, half serious. We glanced at the colorful chaos that unfolded around us, and I couldn't shake the feeling that this moment was a beautiful mischief worth celebrating. Just outside the party's delightful chaos, Karen stood, trying to cloak herself in an air of disdain. Her impeccably coiffed hair seemed even more voluminous, almost inflating with indignation, as if buoyed by the desperation of her futile mission. With arms crossed fiercely, she resembled a vengeful hen guarding her coop. "This is a violation of community spirit," she shouted, throwing around the phrase like a piñata ready to burst. The absurd notion that Joy could infringe upon her idea of propriety sent the gathering into fresh gales of laughter. It was remarkable, really. How could one woman's entitlement feel so juvenile yet relentless? I waved cheerily, my heart pounding with all the deliciousness of the moment. Would I really stick it to the queen of HOA darkness? "Yes, please. A violation of community spirit?" I echoed dramatically, weaving through the crowd until I reached her. With a grin wide enough to rival the moon, I lowered my voice conspiratorially. "Do you not hear? This is empowerment, a revolt against beige fencing and cookie-cutter lives." Laughter rippled through the crowd, and even a few neighbors dared to nod along to my absurd mishaps, finding solidarity in laughter. The tension twisted in all the right ways as Karen's face morphed once again into an expression that resembled a toddler without her favorite toy. For once, I felt a powerful rush of triumph against her continued crusade to squash our fun. But before I could bask too long in that triumphant glare, a wild idea seized me. What if we actually made her join? "Join us, Karen," I declared, springing forward, fully fueled by the throes of community mischief. Why not embrace this chaotic joy instead of going toe-to-toe with us? Come have a burger. Let's cheat the HOA rules together over some good old-fashioned grilled goodness. Who knows, you might find yourself laughing too. I gestured towards the thrumming BBQ barrage laid out, picturing her absolutely horrified at the prospect. Forget the bylaws. It's about good eats and community heart. A hush brushed past the gathering while Karen wavered, expression flashing between contemptuous reprimand and the unmistakable intrigue of rebellion. After all, who could resist the smell of perfectly grilled burgers wafting through the air like an irresistible, smoky siren song? Ah, who am I kidding? I continued with feigned sincerity, raising my eyebrows exaggeratedly. You do love managerial control too much to stoop to such spontaneous fun, right? And just like that, the dam broke and laughter erupted once more. The absurdity of the situation grew to epic proportions as neighbors shouted out encouragements, beckoning her to try this newfound freedom. Like a coiled spring unraveling into a joyful explosion, it was chaos personified. Meanwhile, Lila and a couple of brave souls began crafting makeshift karaoke stations, utilizing old cardboard boxes like glorious stages. The volume of laughter and song soon drowned out Karen's refusal, wrapping the community tighter in a synchronized embrace of mischief and freedom. It was as if laughter truly became the battle cry, echoing off the quaint houses framing our suburban paradise. In that instant, I realized that sometimes rebellion didn't wear a black cape. It danced barefoot in the grass, laughter trailing behind like joyful confetti in the wind. The day might have started on the trajectory of a mundane HOA complaint, but as we stood there, I understood we were burning the rulebook and fanning the flames of community spirit. After all, who could imagine HOA meetings ever leading to killer BBQ jingles and an impromptu song about Karen? In that moment, it was no longer just about me or even her. We had become part of a wider revolt full of laughter and audacity. Would we move forward with our epic rebellion, armed with burgers in hand and questionable karaoke talent? There it was, the shining metallic eye in the sky, spinning around and humming a disturbing little drone tune that made me question my entire life's choices. My living room window felt smaller, almost like it was shrinking in the face of this modern marvel of surveillance horror. What was this? A high-tech panopticon in my own neighborhood? Karen Prescott, the perennial queen of the Homeowners Association, had decided that our pristine streets needed to be monitored for trash can compliance. I had already anticipated the HOA would lead us down increasingly absurd paths, but turning our neighborhood into a surveillance state felt like we were all unwitting extras in a dystopian film. Had I somehow missed the memo that the HOA turned into a reality show production overnight? Segueing in what felt like combat boots through quicksand, I recalled the tumultuous negotiations over my driveway, the battleground of aesthetics where the HOA decided my tasteful yet functional gravel was an affront to their visual superiority. Weeks turned into months of heated emails and passive-aggressive letters promising fines in the thousands for improper landscaping. Sure, my driveway could have passed for a Vikings impromptu campsite, but hey, it did its job. Looking back, my driveway saga paled in comparison to this new threat. I gathered the twisted humor of my neighbors during a hastily arranged emergency caffeine meetup in Lila's kitchen, cramming mugs of coffee and donuts, while we grieved the loss of personal space to a pink-eyed, whirring monstrosity. We could either sit down and sip our lattes while Karen basked in her self-created glory, or we could battle back. With the spirit of a caffeinated gladiator, ready for a brawl, I took the first step. My escape into the vast realms of the internet began, morphing me into a digital detective hunting for vulnerabilities. Stretched out on my couch, surrounded by the disarray of tech magazines and neon energy drink cans, I quickly became engrossed in the dark art of hacking. It felt eerily thrilling and entirely absurd to be plotting how to hijack drones meant to patrol my neighborhood, originally designed to keep tabs on trash cans with a zeal only the HOA could muster. My poor laptop was about to be cranked up to 11. Every random TikTok hack video suddenly felt prescient and necessary as I collected tips, tricks, and inspiration for my impending technological revolution. The more I dug, the more ludicrous the entire situation became. A spark of an idea flashed. I wasn't merely going to disable the drones or commandeer them into the night. Oh no, this was about taking justice into my own hands. I planned to imprison these buzzing eyes just for Karen Prescott, letting them trail her like a shadowed entourage throughout the neighborhood. An eye for an eye, I thought, cackling like a cartoon villain at the very thought of Karen being followed by relentless aerial cameras that might catch her hotly disputing a positioning of garden gnomes. The very opportunity to catch a glimpse of her shrill rage was more precious than gold, and all it would take was a series of lines of code that would have even the next generation techies shaking their heads in disbelief. My only ally during this treacherous mission was Lila, who, after a slightly panicked phone call filled with far too many caffeine-induced ramblings, arrived at my doorstep. "You're insane, but this is hysterical," she laughed, tossing her mess of black hair as she plopped down beside me, the comfortable chaos of her oversized sweater enveloping us both like a warm blanket threatening a schadenfreude meltdown. Together we conjured up the master plan, pulling together lines of code, cross-referencing drone operations manuals, and endless conspiratorial whispers about how best to go about disabling Karen's watchful eyes. Dreams of drones gliding innocently behind her during her infamous lawn inspections filled my thoughts. I could see it, a perfect orchestration of revenge wrapped up in innovation, serving her a fitting taste of her own medicine. The day of reckoning arrived, cloaked in the guise of an unremarkable Saturday. I donned my Community Surveillance Disruptor t-shirt, a self-created graphic that I absolutely wished would be worn at neighborhood events one day, as the drones were prepared to fly their predictable routes. The plan was deceptively simple. I just had to upload the algorithms I'd crafted into the drone's unsuspecting system while pretending to recite HOA bylaws like a mantra. If Lila and I could pull this off, I would be a legend among our neighbors, a tech-savvy Robin Hood of suburban rebellion. What could possibly go wrong? A drone or two, or maybe 10, gliding obediently behind the supreme Karen Prescott, could be the ultimate act of urban mischief I ever pulled. The thought sent a thrill chasing down my spine. Sure, the mission set me in a position to be labeled the local madman, or even worse in the HOA circles. But could I really let Karen go on maintaining her tyrannical reign? As the drones whirred to life and took to the skies, ready to play security detail, I couldn't help but smirk, imagining them diving around her as she fumed about some garden issue. The winds of change were blowing and, quite frankly, chaos was just my style. Would the HOA face the reckoning it so desperately needed? Or would I be unwittingly invited into an even crazier conspiracy of antics involving Karen and the drone army? Only time would tell. As the fateful Saturday sun emerged, illuminating the watery skies with subtle hues of blue, I felt a wave of exhilaration mingle with dread flow through my veins. With Lila at my side, the battleground of my living room transformed into a tech-savvy war room thrumming with electrifying buzz. There were laptops strewn everywhere, a chaotic cornucopia of cables, half-eaten donuts, and an absurd amount of energy drinks that would make a marching band envious, my very own caffeinated arsenal against the tyranny of Karen Prescott. We shared mischievous glances, as if we were co-conspirators in some daring heist, Sir Lancelot and the techie version of Robin Hood plotting to disrupt the very essence of HOA oppression. Would people recognize my t-shirt, how fittingly I'd named it? A title like Community Surveillance Disruptor demanded recognition, right? At precisely 10 o'clock, our enemy, that buzzing Orwellian fiend, spooled into the sky like a metallic hummingbird on a caffeine high. There it floated, commanding aerial superiority while I readied the USB drive like a covert spy armed with a nuke. With every passing moment, I reveled in the idea that I wasn't merely deviating from the HOA's grim narrative, but writing my own sequel to Karen's dictatorship, a gladiatorial sequel where I emerged victorious, embroidered with respect. The perfectly manicured lawns below seemed oblivious to their impending entertainment, but oh, how I fantasized about the mesmerized and horrified faces of my neighbors witnessing the inevitable ballet of the drones, flipping and swerving right over the unrepentant queen's carefully curated yard. In that moment, each passive-aggressive letter and condescending glance from Karen suddenly fueled my determination to see this through. My fingers flew over the keyboard like a symphony conductor, orchestrating mayhem, a vortex of lines of code streaming past my eyes. "Can you see it?" I bravely asked Lila, who sat perched beside me, her expression a blend of concern and exhilaration as she encouraged my audacious plan. "The drones will follow her as she sips her overpriced latte. Just imagine it. A relentless swarm at her side like devoted minions." I could almost hear the cacophony of Karen's shrilly voice as she tried to wave them off, her futile attempts to maintain decorum like a poorly scripted sitcom playing out right in front of our eyes. Just as I hit enter, signaling the drones to register the relentless streams of data, I could hear the distant chirping of my neighbor's bird, poetic, really, as if nature itself was cheering on my insurrection. As the drones unleashed their newfound programming, I watched in disarray as they wobbled awkwardly in the air, then regained their composure, zooming skyward in an unholy alliance. My heart raced with a churning excitement, a blend of nerves and laughter bubbling just beneath the surface of my stern facade. In my mind, I was no hero. I was a suburban legend being born. the tech revolution highlighting the absurd tyranny of our HOA. "It's happening," I squealed, offering a triumphant fist pump. If only this moment would be forever immortalized in posterity. But reality soon jolted me back with the loud blare of Karen's voice that echoed from down the street, ordering the drones to cease their ridiculous antics. Her fury, palpable even from this distance, sprinkled my feelings of triumph with a hint of trepidation, and in the quiet harbinger of her discontent, I felt my heart race even faster. Would we witness an all-out standoff? To my delightful shock, the drones obediently paired in a circle around Karen as she paced her yard like a lioness surveying her territory, finely manicured as always. The drones spun like they were at a quirky dance-off, reminding me of children trying to impress at a school talent show, adorably incompetent, yet dazzlingly disruptive. Karen's indignation escalated from confusion to boiling rage as she flailed her arms dramatically at the indignant mechanical flock, now zigzagging and circling her like thunderous bees defending their hive, an endearing sight if there ever was one. I wished I had popcorn as I imagined the characters of our neighborhood united by an absurd whimsy. It was a scene right out of a sitcom. Would our previous communiques ever inform the world of what could happen when bureaucracy meets tech-savvy defiance? In my wildly animated visualization fueled by caffeine, I realized that I had stepped into a full-blown comedy sketch dressed as a tech vigilante. Yet, the reality needed an upgrade from mere shenanigans. My mission was turning into something beyond a mere display of petty revenge. Catching Karen in a whirlwind of her entitled hubris suddenly felt more monumental, almost legendary, like too much power concentrated into one resident's hands was being hilariously unseated. Would she finally understand how it felt to be powerless amidst the watchful eyes of her own creations? The buzzing drones whirred in unison, seemingly taunting her, leading me to contemplate whether my neighborhood could be liberated from her oppressiveness just as liberally as it had been suffocated in it. Or perhaps it was just the caffeine talking, and I was getting entirely too invested in the dramatic events at hand. As I contemplated calling the local news about my impending legend status, I caught Lila's gleeful expression, her laughter echoing with a contagious giddiness. "This is absolutely insane. We should celebrate," she exclaimed, much too loud for our own good. But at that moment, I didn't care. The bevy of drones was sweeping around my HOA nemesis like a phalanx of flying gluten-free cupcakes, rainbows, and confetti, the resistance package that our community desperately needed. Victory was near. Would this momentous event catalyze a change not only in Karen, but in the entire spirit of our neighborhood, liberated from the shackles of banal conformity? Only one thought lingered in my mind as I gleefully anticipated the impending melodrama that my tech revolt had unleashed upon the unsuspecting HOA. As the drones wobbled like hyperactive puppies funded by caffeine, I marveled at the realization that we were indeed experiencing a live-action performance of HOA melodrama. Karen had now suited up for battle, her floral blouse billowing in the breeze as she waved her arms like a maestro conducting an orchestra of chaos. "Get away from me, you mechanical menace!" she screeched, a sound so rich in outrage that I half expected a flock of crows to swoop down and join the commotion. There was something undeniably empowering in knowing that my work, my relentless coding hustle fueled by energy drinks and donuts, had resulted in a frontier of hilarity and defiance. Each flailing motion of hers looked increasingly desperate, as if she were trying to shoo away an invisible force that only an overzealous HOA president could conjure up in her mind. I could practically hear the raised eyebrows of my neighbors from their windows, trying not to laugh while respecting the ludicrous spectacle unfolding before them. Lila, catching the infectious energy of the moment, leaned closer to me, her eyes alight with mischief. "Jackson, this is prime entertainment. I mean, have you considered adding a laugh track to this whole production in case it ever gets picked up by the streaming services?" Her grin spread wide and I couldn't help but chuckle. The thought of Karen as a reality TV villain made me envision networks pitching shows like Desperate HOA Wives or Drones Gone Wild. But there was no denying it. We were witnessing the dazzling acrobatics of community oppression being hilariously dismantled right in our backyard. How do you feel about being a directorial genius, plus making it socially acceptable to revel in a little disorganization? "It sounds fabulously marketable," she added with an exaggerated wink, her enthusiasm buzzing through the air like the equipment doing all the dancing. As the commotion escalated, Karen's mounting frustration became more pronounced. Her furious gestures transformed her from a mere HOA president to a human tornado of entitlement. I couldn't help but revel in her predicament. My fellow neighbors began poking their heads out, mulling around the street like curious penguins at the polar ice caps, wondering if they should join the snowy ruckus. "Are those drones stalking Karen?" one whispered, disbelief written all over her face. "Shouldn't someone stop this?" Another chimed in with a mix of concern and excitement. I grinned, explaining how the showdown was part of my master plan to expose her reign of absurd rules. Turning her misguided authority into viral entertainment felt like justice served with hot coffee, contrasted against the arrogance of her smugness. With Karen now fully committed to her one-woman battle against airborne bureaucratic nonsense, an unexpected camaraderie sparked amongst my fellow residents. "We should form a club, HOA Outlaws or something. I call dibs on being the vice president," shouted a neighbor, rolling his eyes as he watched Karen spin in a frenzied daze. The hybrid of concern and amusement among the community was palpable, almost as if we were on the brink of discovering a collective rebellion against the monotonous churn of quotidian rules. My heart raced with exhilaration. Suddenly, I was more than just a tech-savvy troublemaker. I was a movement. Lila nudged me, reminding me that great power came with great responsibility, and perhaps I should moderate my heroic ambitions just a touch. How silly of her! I was trying to break the barriers of HOA dilapidation, not host an etiquette class. But the pièce de résistance faded in and out of focus as I witnessed a true transformation emerging from the chaos. Our community felt lighter, even giddier. The people were radiating joyous gossip, rallying together against the tyrant of the lawnmowers and the mailboxes. Each hopelessly flawed attempt of Karen to reclaim her territory echoed across the street, and with every exaggerated dance of the drones, they became our loyal allies in the quest against monotonous conformity. The oppressive cloud of HOA rule that once loomed over us like a rain fog began to resemble more of a gentle mist that we could kick aside with our feet in delight. Lila raised her arms dramatically and proclaimed, "Let's toast to the day we stood up for our lawns. Drones for everyone." I almost choked on my drink as imagery of tiny drones popping champagne corks assaulted my mind's eye, blending whimsical absurdity with beautiful rebellion. Within moments, Karen's futile efforts had turned her from a self-proclaimed overlord to the unwitting star of a comedic epic. With an audacity that could only be described as majestic, she bellowed for someone, anyone, to help her, pointing dramatically at me as if I were the antagonist in a tragic tale. "Jackson Mills, you can't just," she began, but I could no longer contain my laughter. I interjected with a wave. "I'm just getting started, Karen. How's it feel to be the only one on the HOA roll call?" Every ounce of concern and indignation now painted on her face was endlessly confirming my role in redefining how the neighborhood viewed the farcical overreach of power. I wondered, would the day be remembered in history books as the glorious saga where the HOA met their match? Or had they simply become the unintended stars in this sitcom-esque showdown? The drones, delightfully buzzed with energy, hovered like miniature jesters ready to enlighten the night. As night crept in, paints of twilight illuminated the absurd scene. A little surreal but undeniably liberating. I felt a spark of excitement twinkle in my heart. Here was the moment where we rewrote our narrative as a neighborhood, no longer shackled by whimsical rules dictated by one audacious Karen Prescott. My fingers danced across my phone as I considered posting the event on social media with the hashtag #DronesVsKaren. Would I peak in the follower count? Or, better yet, inspire others? The thought of a viral sensation blazing through the internet felt refreshingly revolutionary. In that swirling chaos of laughter and the unresolved motifs of rebellion, I could only hold my breath in joyful anticipation of what this newfound unity might catalyze in our shared space. Would Karen's reign come to an inglorious end tonight? Or were we only in the first act of the most ridiculous community theater debacle ever? Life was about to get absurdly fun, and I was all in. As the evening twilight danced around us like a band of mischievous sprites, I took a moment to appreciate the sheer absurdity of our predicament. Karen stood there, a tempest of anger and indignation, waving her arms as if she could summon the very heavens to intervene. Her voice, strained from repeated demands for order, rose and fell with all the grace of a cat in a bathtub. "Someone needs to put a stop to this nonsensical rebellion," she hollered, as the drones whirred around, dipping and diving like they were reenacting a scene from some high-stakes aerial dogfight. This was no ordinary HOA meeting. This was the stuff of legends. I half expected someone to roll out a popcorn machine and start distributing bags to our increasingly invested neighbors. They were here for the show, and I was more than happy to deliver. Lila stepped up beside me, her eyes sparkling with a combination of mischief and encouragement. "You realized you've practically become a superhero, right? We should definitely give you a cape," she quipped, snickering at the irony of it all. I had invaded our community theater, morphed into the protagonist of this comic disaster, and sent Karen spiraling into dramatic chaos. My heart swelled with a rebellious glee, as I confidently declared, "Well, let me settle my cape on this mismatched ensemble of cargo shorts and graphic tees." We cackled as our amused neighbors filled the street, their camaraderie palpable, buzzing with laughter that floated up towards the stars. Who knew that the secret to community bonding was just the melodrama of one HOA president losing her mind to a fleet of drones armed with nothing but sarcasm? Not one to be outdone, Karen hurled a finger towards me, accusing me of hacking into community safety measures. "Oh, really, Karen?" As if making the neighborhood feel like a scene out of a cheap horror movie wasn't enough to justify my actions. Her bewildered expression, now a mix of rage and desperation, made me feel like I was starring in my very own sitcom with her as the overacting antagonist. "Are you really suggesting that I'm the villain? Because if I'm the villain, then you, my dear Karen, are the tragic comic relief," I shot back, my heart racing as I reveled in the banter. Something inside me ignited. Suddenly, the endless rules and regulations that once loomed heavy in our lives seemed laughably trivial compared to the ridiculous reality we had crafted. As Karen continued her struggle against our airborne companions, the banter grew louder, and the winds of revolution breezed through the street like a long-awaited sigh of camaraderie. "This is incredible," one neighbor whispered loudly enough for everyone to hear. "I've never seen Karen lose it like this. Do we have betting odds on how long until she bursts a blood vessel?" Another promptly chimed in. "I'd say we place our bets now. She's at a solid 8 on the Karen meter." The evening's heavy tension had morphed into a celebration of community resilience as the chants for freedom from HOA tyranny echoed like war cries against the frustrating and oppressive atmosphere Karen had cultivated. With each little jab and snort of laughter, our neighborhood was slowly morphing into a rebellion network, leveraging humor as our secret weapon. Encouraged by the unexpected support, I dialed up the shenanigans. "Ladies and gentlemen," I announced, earning the attention of the frolicking crowd, "allow me to introduce the true star of this evening, your benevolent hackers and their indefatigable drones." The crowd erupted into applause, laughter in buoyant waves imbuing even the drab suburb with a spark of life. Every shared giggle reminded us that when united against a common foe, we were capable of astounding change, or beautiful chaos, if you prefer. To my shock, even Karen couldn't contain her dramatic flair, throwing herself into a pose with an exaggerated sigh that would have impressed any Broadway actor. It was as if she suddenly turned into the star of a comedy, our very own nightmare neighbor channeling her finest diva. But as the drones shimmered above us, I felt a sense of dread creep in alongside the delightful absurdity. What if we pushed her too far? This was funny, don't get me wrong, but I knew the depths of her entitlement. Would she retaliate not only against me, but against everyone with her disapproving arsenal of rules? My heart raced as I glanced at Lila, who reflected my uncertainty. Yet there was also an undercurrent of hope that echoed through our tiny rebellion. This isn't just about me, but about several neighbors striving for a sliver of peace in our tumultuous HOA world. Just as doubt began to gnaw at me, Lila nudged me with a grin and said, "Embrace the chaos, Jackson. Our strength lies in our laughter." So I did, letting the moment carry me as I comically led our little flock towards the so-called freedom we defined in this uncontrolled absurdity. As the clamor of joyous laughter echoed around, our little commune became a sanctuary of rebellion against conformity. I watched as people rallied together under the most ridiculous circumstances, tiresome red tape blowing in the wind like confetti. What had started as a cheeky maneuver to swipe at Karen's machinations was now a manifestation of unity in a world that often left us feeling powerless. Perhaps the fight against HOA tyranny was only in its initial acts, but the real victory lay in our shared sense of belonging, destinies entwined, whether we liked it or not. What if we were the change? What if we stood firm against the oppressive currents trying to drown us? My epiphany spiraled into a radiant idea, igniting visions of future meetings crafted with bouts of laughter rather than exhausting debates. Would we crowdfund for our little revolution against HOA tyranny? Would we sow the seeds for not just a better neighborhood, but a community of joy, solidarity, and shared laughs? "Let's plan a neighborhood barbecue," I shouted spontaneously. The immediate gasps of surprise sent ripples through the gathering, but then a cheer erupted, followed by chants. "Burgers over bureaucracy," they hollered. This was a revolution of soaring spirits. Maybe it would take a literal dumpster fire to propel this movement, or a full honesty week where we all collectively choose to engage only in kindness. The battle was heating up, and I was leading the charge, where surrendering to the joy felt less like an option and more like an inevitable choice. Thanks for sticking around with me through the chaos to the end. Want more high-stakes HOA drama? Check out our recent HOA clash with the video on the right. Or let YouTube pick your next wild ride with the video on the left. Whichever way you go, buckle up. There's plenty more HOA insanity on the way. Tune in again for more HOA chaos.